This season, we're stepping into a special 5-part series called Gutsy Grief with my friend John Jeff Hutter. Together, we're exploring, John Jeff and I, what happens when life stops making sense and the unexpected wisdom that can emerge from the middle of it. Grief isn't only about loss, it's about disruption. The moments when the life we thought we were living suddenly cracks open. In this series, we explore how grief, transition, and major life changes can become raw material for deeper self-knowledge and really a more honest way of living. If you've ever found yourself asking, who am I now? You're in the right place. Let's get started with today's episode. Okay, here we are back. Episode 4 with John Jeff, Gutsy Grief. I'm curious. You've been out in the world talking about sharing your experience. What's happening? What's showing up for you?
I've referred to this as my feral community phase, where I spent so much time with myself, either in my head, on the page, in this office, writing the book, that I probably disappeared from the world for a good 18 months. And so beginning in May, when we officially launched the book out in the public, I started to do a lot more, both with the book in the community, but also just like existing as a human out in the world again. And it has been an affirming process because, when you're writing a book, and even once you send it out, you really only know how it's affecting people if they're telling you. So if they're going out of their way to send you a message or something like that, that has happened with the book, and those things are meaningful. But I've come to appreciate that, especially something like this, where it's a very personal story. I have given so much of my emotional experience to others, and there's definitely a vulnerability hangover that comes with that, especially when you don't know how other people are receiving it. It's not about whether people like it or not. It's about understanding the impact of our stories when we share our stories, any of us, with anyone. And it wasn't until I started talking about the stories in the book live with other humans present that I began to see the things that make our individual stories so unique, that can sometimes feel as though because of that no one could relate to them, begin to click with people, and you can see that so much more powerfully in person. And so over the last 2 months, at least, I have been out and about talking about the book, and most recently was a part of something in Austin called Hyde Park Storytelling, which invites folks to share their stories with a live audience for 7 minutes. You can't read from anything, no notes, no phone. I mean, it's pure, as I refer to it, like straight from source. Like, you are up there on the stage sharing your story. And I think that has been the most powerful moment for me in my experience with Gutsy Grief so far.
Why do you think that vulnerability happens, and how has that happened for you, and how do you take care of yourself in it?
First, let's address the fact that we live in a world that, despite vulnerability, largely due in part to Brene Brown's talks and education about the topic, as well as other academics and thought leaders, vulnerability still is a relatively new concept for a lot of people, and it is still associated with weakness. We have to define what is vulnerability. And at the risk of messing up the academic definition, I'll share my perspective. Vulnerability is for me the open communication about my internal experience. And that could be everything from my fears and insecurities to sadness or challenging emotions that don't make sense, that I can't quite verbalize. Vulnerability is the sharing of our inner world with others, specifically and particularly the parts of our inner world that we may be afraid, ashamed, or embarrassed of. And so for me, the vulnerability hangover is the experience after sharing openly all of those things, where we begin to second guess ourselves. Like, why, like, I'm cringing. Why did I share that? I'm wincing. Like, someone's going to read that and take it the wrong way. It's the embarrassment of being seen, which is to truly be known, we have to be vulnerable. As a society, performance culture and polish and curated images have become so popular and commonplace because of social media that this idea of truly being known is terrifying. And so the vulnerability hangover is the mental gymnastics of wondering, how will people respond to me being known? Good, bad, ugly, and all.
As you have been vulnerable and opened yourself to be known on social media in with this Hyde Park storytelling, that the impact of your story is bringing connection, bringing a sense of community and sharing.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that where it comes from, and I can connect it back to seeing the value of the work too, is that I think I've shared with you before that my ability to turn myself inside out and share with others is something that has come pretty naturally to me. I have always, for the most part, been comfortable sharing my emotional experience. And especially in the last 10 years since losing my dad, I've become much more not just comfortable, but it just naturally happens. I am not a mysterious person. I share what's coming up for me, and because it is something that is so unconscious for me, I forget that it is something a lot of people struggle with. They're not accustomed to it. There are cultural barriers to expression. There are religious, social, I mean, you name it. There are so many reasons why we as humans are so unaccustomed to and uncomfortable with sharing ourselves. Again, because that is not how I have lived, I can forget that it's the water that I swim in because it's just what exists for me. And so, specifically being in community and around other people experiencing my story, I've had people come up to me and talk to me afterwards and share aspects of their story that they are not comfortable sharing with other people. It sounds obvious as I say it now that there are a lot of families and communities that do not disclose or discuss suicide as the cause of death for a lot of reasons, because some of the reasons can be deeply cultural, and then others do some cognitive gymnastics to make it more palatable. And so
Mhm.
instead of making the argument that we don't talk about this person's death due to suicide because of shame or cultural barriers or stigma, they tend to say, well, I just don't want my loved one to be defined by the way that they died. And we can pull at that one quite a bit because I have a lot of feelings about that. Being out in the wild with people has been a reminder that there's value in my story and impact it can make. And as a result, seeing that all of our stories have the ability to touch each other in ways that I don't think we fully appreciate.
I too feel like I'm a very open book person. Even though I'm open book, though, I don't know that I feel truly known very often, even though I'll give you a lot of details of my life, but there is a different quality to having somebody know you or receive it. There's a receiving of it, particularly around suicide. We already have our own layers of guardedness around being known, each of us. And then when you add somebody that you love and care about and everybody's differences around how much of this person do we want to be known now afterwards, and then the stigma of suicide and what that means.
Yeah.
To end your life feels pretty powerful. That's a pretty
Yeah.
powerful choice to make.
I think being known is multidimensional in two key ways. One is that for me, being known is a two-way relationship. Being known isn't just about sharing; it's about the ability for other people to listen deeply enough to digest the information coming from you, either verbally, behaviorally, spiritually, or otherwise, to be able to truly understand. And then the other dimension of it is volume versus value of information. Because I could tell you a lot about myself. And if I'm just giving you a list of things that I like and don't like, that's only giving you a very shallow dimension of me being known. There's a difference between saying I like coffee and I don't like tea and saying I am deeply afraid of being restrained or not being free. I mean, those
Mhm.
are the depth of that information is so different. Maybe there's a third dimension here too, which is presentation versus source. I can present a lot of information about myself. I can clean it up and polish it to make everything sound and feel in a way that makes me feel like I'm being known. But what I'm actually doing is allowing the rehearsed, airbrushed version of myself to be known. And that's very different than sharing from source, which is what I often refer to when I'm live on a stage, whether it is for work or fun or well-being or whatever may bring me onto a stage in front of an audience. There's just something about it that for me plugs into this place where my body is like offline. The concept of my physical entity very much just like evaporates, and I'm speaking straight from what I'm feeling, and that's a totally different way to be known. So that is how I tend to think about this. And I think that unfortunately, because we live in a world that right now is so overwhelmed by whatever is the sexy clickbait, something that activates that really intense response of either desire or lust or comparison or envy or anger, like if it's not those things or intended to provoke those things, I think it can often get lost in the velocity of that type of energy, if that makes sense.
Yeah. We're really good, some of us, at being noticed or not noticed. I mean, either way, the clickbait, the rage bait, the getting views, we're really good as
Yeah.
humans at figuring out how to get noticed because when we're little, that's how we get our needs met.
The adult version of a temper tantrum is a thirst trap. What is it that is going to get your attention the fastest?
Right.
It's like as a child, we stomp our feet and cry. And as adults, we either get angry and yell or we take our clothes off.
My ex-husband said we're all just 5-year-olds with experience. That's fair. Yeah,
Yeah.
accurate. As you think about the feral community that is the vibration you're on right now, there's some mutuality here that we're in this together. And I'm curious what you're finding, especially when it comes to grief, when we are so traumatized, where if nobody has ever listened to us, we will suck the space.
Yeah, let's talk about community.
Okay.
So I am like a dog with a bone with community right now. It is a concept that comes up pretty often in happiness studies. And it is a concept that I think I dismissed for a long time because I thought I knew it. And I thought that I had experienced it. And what I have discovered about community in the last year specifically is that it facilitates this idea of being known. Because being noticed is something that can be done without any type of relationship. You get noticed by doing the things I mentioned before, like taking your clothes off or having a really strong emotional reaction for people to. Being known requires an ongoing dialogue and frequent touch points, whether they are long conversations or micro interactions at the coffee shop. Community is a multifaceted concept because it's not just about having a few deep relationships. It's about the integration and overlap of those deep relationships with these micro interactions you have with the barista or the cashier at the grocery store. And I think where community becomes multidimensional is when you are connecting people to each other. Like this morning, I went to a workout with a friend of mine who I haven't seen in a while, and we were having coffee at this magazine shop afterwards. And the owner of the magazine shop, who I have met before and talked about grief with, came up to us and he met my friend and I introduced the friend. I don't know what neurochemical it was that went off in my brain, but there was something in that moment, a feeling of connection, not just because I was talking to two people, but because I had brought people together. And in the book, I talk about being an opening. And the idea is that we are part of being in community is the chemical reaction we have from each other. Different chemicals or electrons, as they come into contact with each other, they are fundamentally changed. And in the same way, I believe that We are in constant change as a result of our interaction with people. And that change can both be positive and negative. Think about when you're driving and you are cut off by someone. There is something that fundamentally changes you in that moment. And that change may be temporary, but that interaction fundamentally changes you. You have the choice to determine if that change is that it pisses you off and you flip them off or whatever, or that it causes you to catch yourself, think about it, have empathy. Have you heard of the concept of the blue zones?
Oh, yeah, yes, but speak to that.
There are, I believe, 5 or
Mm.
6 different regions in the world that have the highest proportion of centenarians. So that's folks over 100 years old. There's one in Greece. There is one in Nicoya in Costa Rica that I've actually been to. There's a region in California and Sardinia and Okinawa. And when you look at those 5 areas, they have a lot in common. There's a higher level of physical activity. There is access to and prevalence of healthier foods. But the golden thread that links all of these together and has shown the strongest empirical evidence of contributing to overall health, well-being, happiness is community. I was in Nicoya in Costa Rica 2 years ago, and they had just opened a McDonald's. And I thought it was hilarious that, like, this place where there were more people over 100, there were people going to McDonald's. The drive-through around McDonald's, like, wrapped around twice. I was dying of curiosity, so we had to go to McDonald's in the healthiest place in the world. And I'll tell you, it was the same garbage as any McDonald's. But I think that for me was the moment of like, oh, like community is the golden thread of all of this. Because
Mm.
ultimately, if you have a strong knit community of people who you can do things with, you are more likely to
Mhm.
exercise together. Habits are compounding. If you are with others who are living healthy lifestyles, that physically active, eating healthy, all of those things, it's more likely to happen. But I think even more than that, with community and blue zones and this idea of overall health and happiness, is that social media has made us so much lonelier. We have fallen for this myth of connection because I can text you 17 time zones away, halfway across the world. I can message you on Facebook. I can like something on Instagram, and it creates this illusion of community. We're constantly aware of what each other is
Mhm.
doing. That is the being noticed. It is not being seen. And so much of being seen requires seeing the different parts of ourselves and knowing the different parts of ourselves. And community is not something that can exist without the dynamics of in-person interaction.
Mhm. It requires, even though you and I are not in person together,
Yeah, totally.
there is
Fair.
a two-way. I think about some influencers too that I love watching. I feel like I know them, but I don't, they're not known by me because it does require this wrestling of curiosity and understanding and questions. If you tell me something, even if you tell me, I have this fear of being restrained. If there's not you coming back being like, what do you mean? If there's not a two-way being in it, are you really being known?
It also begs the question, can you be known without knowing the person who is knowing you?
Right.
Are you only capable of being known to the extent that you know the other person knowing you?
Here's when you started talking about community, I was thinking about too this community inside of myself. I don't know if you're familiar with internal family systems. This idea that there are all these parts in me, and they're sometimes conflicting, and they're sometimes polarized, and sometimes one part takes over the whole system, and I'm a wreck. I am best when these parts inside of me are being attended to, and I'm attuned to them, and I am giving them a voice. They're communing all of my parts, which then
Yeah.
makes me more likely to be in community and curious about someone else because I don't have parts that are demanding you notice them. so that I feel okay. When we talk specifically about loss, loss can be so isolating. That process of grief can be so isolating, especially when somebody is not noticing or allowing however that looks for us. Even if you get into beautiful community, which I have been in some beautiful communities where I feel so known, where parts of me have become known because the community brought it from me when I couldn't bring it myself, but we're all humans and there is some inherent loss because it usually can't go on forever or something happens and we see how different we really are when in this other moment we were so intimate and so connected and knowing each other and then we hit that place where we can't accept this other part.
This conversation makes me think about the concept of community loss. There's a difference between experiencing loss and performing loss. Experiencing loss means to be present with your feelings and to truly feel what it is that comes up as a result of and the
Mm.
performance of loss is sometimes this intellectualizing of what we're going through. It reminds me of the times that have felt the most emotional and been able to communicate or express that emotion was the result of an interaction that I'm in. So I could be sitting in my room thinking about my dad or thinking about my dogs that passed away and not experience or express the emotion with the same level of intensity and realness as if someone were asking me. When someone asks me, tell me about your dad or tell me about your dogs, tell me about that experience, that conjures up something. It's an act of penetration where it immediately forces all of that through. And I don't know if it can be accessed in the same way if you're sitting in a room by yourself thinking about it. There's something about that. I don't know if that experience necessarily has to be in the form of someone asking a question. I think it can come through music or a picture. This isn't a fully formed thought, but it's definitely a thread that I want to pull on as I continue to talk about this type of stuff. Being able to be in spaces with people where we can hold grief and look at it together is a very different experience than a solitary one where we are in our thoughts. It changes and evolves by other people touching it.
When we think about grief in community or finding those resources or even what we have to find inside of ourselves to lean in to experiencing loss instead of performing loss.
Yeah, where do we begin? At the risk of sounding full of myself,
Mm,
I think it starts with people like me. There are people out there who, for whatever reason,
yeah.
are more comfortable sharing their experience, the messy magic without polishing or cutting or trying to make it more palatable, to have the courage and the guts to share their stories. And not that I believe I am the only person who can do this. I know there are other people out there, but it's a matter of like connecting with those people and reminding them in the way that I have to remind myself that there is something special about the ability, interest, and strength in turning ourselves inside out so that other people can experience it. Because again, in community, we change each other.
Yeah.
And so by people like me sharing those things, it creates this social or sociochemical reaction where there is someone in the audience who's like, you know what? I've really been wanting to talk about my story. And now I feel like I can do it because I've seen someone else do it. And then there is someone who's like, you know what? I've been journaling about this. I want to talk to a friend about it. And then there's another person who's like, you know, I've been having these thoughts in my head. I want to start writing about it. It is inspiring and encouraging other people from where you are to get to one step closer to sharing. It's reasonable to crawl, walk, run. Why don't you start with putting it on a page?
Yeah.
And I like to think of it as a social movement where the more of us who are talking about the real shit that we are facing, the more other people are going to become comfortable expressing the shit they're going through in a way that feels the most accessible to where they are right now.
I agree. It is people like you that one have developed the tools to have the courage to lean in and model. There's a modeling of what it looks like to experience versus perform.
Cringing at the things that we say is an indication that we're like actually being real, I think. I also have to remind myself to resist the urge to be noticed over the value of being known. The moment I succumb to being noticed is the moment the work stops being about the message and starts becoming about me. In the world that we live in, so much is about what's going to get me noticed, what's going to get the likes, what's going to get the views. Everything is about speed and velocity. How quickly can you grow? How can you go viral? The work that is the most valuable, the crops that are the most nutritious, are the ones that require tending carefully, deliberately, intentionally over time. And that's hard in a vacuum. It's even harder when we are subject to the barrage of urgency that we have in this world. In a world where we're bombarded with information, the most powerful thing we can do is be present with our pain and be present with our story. But presence means staying with it long enough to actually see it for what it is and not trying to optimize it and get through it and get on the other side of it like we often hear.
Is there anything else that you want to say about this?
Loneliness is becoming our next great epidemic. There's a lot of great but disappointing research that shows we are becoming lonelier as a society as a result of a lot of the things that we've already discussed. The Surgeon General has compared loneliness to having the same deleterious health effects as smoke. And because it is something that is not physically tangible, it can be easy to dismiss. And I think that loneliness will continue to be something that we need to combat. The antidote to loneliness is community, and the enemy to community is this spectacle that I think we're seeing a lot in the world. The desire to be noticed, rage bait, to clickbait, to thirst trap people into a reaction. Community is not something that can be built in a day. It takes time. It takes intimacy. It takes vulnerability. And all of those things require time and patience.
Yeah. Is there somewhere, John Jeff, that people can come to find you? Where are you most findable now? Or where would you direct people either to you or elsewhere that feel ready?
You can find me on TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, and I'm John Jeff Hutter on all three of those. And I had someone come up to me at a recent event and she said, I was so excited to come here to hear you talk. And I had that moment of like, me? And it was a moment where all of the silliness of social media felt real for a moment. If you're finding me on there and then coming in person, this feels like it's worth it.
I love you.
I love you. These conversations are like therapy and a gab sesh all in one.
Before we close, I want to leave you with this. Grief doesn't ask us to have everything figured out. It asks us to stay curious about who we are becoming individually and together. Our guests bring such clarity and depth. If you want to explore more of their work, you'll find the links in the show notes. And thank you for joining me and John Jeff on The Unspoken Edge, the place where we name what's missing so you can lead from what matters. If something resonated with you today, share this episode with someone who might need it, or subscribe so you don't miss what's next. And if you're navigating unseen tensions in your leadership or culture, let's connect at mosaiccollaborative.com, because legacy isn't a final chapter. It's what you live into, one conversation at a time.